let's take a look at prejudice and discrimination. Although progress has been made, prejudice and discrimination still exist. In the United States and globally, people get different or unfavorable treatment which has negative consequences. Discrimination is usually based on prejudice. Prejudice is the judgment of a person or situation based on attitudes. We tend to have developed biases as to whom we like and dislike and tend to like people who are like us. We're more attracted to our agenda and biases than we realize because of our subconscious. We tend to view the world from our own self-focused view with an ethnocentric view of our group being the best or right. We need to break away from our prejudices that cloud our positions. Like organizations, we need to develop a global mindset. If someone were to ask you, are you prejudiced? You'd probably say no. However, we all tend to prejudice people and situation. Recall first impressions and the 4-minute barrier. In 4 minutes, you don't have time to get to know someone, yet you make assumptions that affect your behavior. Stereotyping is the process of generalizing the behavior of all members of a group. Your prejudice is often based on a stereotype of a group. To prejudice or to stereotype a person or situation in itself is not harmful. We all tend to do this. Although prejudice is not always negative, if you discriminate based on your prejudice, you may cause harm to yourself and others. Discrimination is behavior for or against a person or a situation. Historically, the 5 areas where discrimination in employment are most common include recruitment. People who hire employees fail to actively recruit people from certain groups to apply for jobs within their organization. Selection. People who select candidates from the recruited applicants fail to hire people from certain groups. Compensation. White males make more money than all other groups. Upward mobility. Race and gender are significant influences on advancement. Evaluation. When organizations do not base evaluations on actual job performance, discrimination in compensation and upward mobility occur. Be aware of the human tendency to prejudice and stereotype others and avoid discriminating based on your prejudices. To help employees overcome prejudice and discrimination, organizations are providing diversity and inclusion training. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, known as the EEOC, minority list includes Hispanics, Asians, African Americans, Native Americans, and Alaska Natives. However, the EEOC protects more than just minorities. The EEOC is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee because of the person's protected class status. Protected class includes a person's race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, gender identity, and sexual orientation, national origin, age, 40 or older, disability, or genetic information. It also makes it illegal to discriminate against a person because the person complained about discrimination, filed a charge of discrimination, or participated in an employment discrimination investigation or a lawsuit. The EEOC has 53 offices across the nation and provides information on employee rights on its website, eeoc.gov. Companies suspected of violating any of these laws may be investigated by the EEOC or become defendants in class action or specific lawsuits. Clearly, it's important for you to be familiar with the laws that protect you from discrimination, your legal rights, and you should also know your organization's diversity guidelines. On an application blank and during interviews, no member of an organization can legally ask discriminatory questions. The 2 major rules of thumb to follow are every question that is asked should be job related. When developing questions, you should have a purpose for using the information. Only ask legal questions you plan to use in your selection process. Any general question you asked should be asked of all candidates. A bona fide occupational qualification, known as a BFOQ, allows discrimination on the basis of religion, sex, or national origin where it's reasonably necessary to the normal operation of a particular enterprise. Let's begin by defining diversity and inclusion and why they're important to you and your organization. Diversity refers to the degree to which differences exist among members of a group or an organization. Inclusion is a practice of ensuring that all employees feel that they belong as valued members of an organization. Here is the EEOC list of 8 groups that can't be discriminated against in the sequence listed on the EEOC website with its definitions. Race discrimination involves treating someone, applicants or employees, unfavorably because they're of a certain race or because of personal characteristics associated with race, such as hair texture, skin color, or certain facial features. Color discrimination involves treating someone unfavorably because of skin color complexion. Religious discrimination involves treating a person unfavorably because of his or her religious beliefs. The law protects not only people who belong to traditional, organized religions, but also others who have sincerely held religious, ethical, or moral beliefs. Sex, including pregnancy, gender identity, and sexual orientation discrimination, involves treating someone unfavorably because of that person's sex. We will discuss sex in more detail in the gender, sexual orientation, and sexual harassment discussions of this presentation. National origin discrimination involves treating people unfavorably because they're from a particular country or part of the world, because of ethnicity or accent, or because they appear to be of a certain ethnic background even if they're not. Age discrimination involves treating some age 40 or older less favorably because of his or her age. Disability discrimination involves unfavorable treatment because someone has a disability. People with a disability have a significant physical, mental, or emotional limitation. The law requires an employer to provide reasonable accommodation to an employee or job applicant with a disability without undue hardship on the employer. Genetic information discrimination prohibits getting and using information about a disability of an individual through genetic tests and the genetic tests of an individual's family member. It includes information about manifestation of disease or disorder in an individual's family members, like family medical history. Although not listed by the EEOC, there are many other types of diversity at work, and everyone should be included and treated fairly. Here are some of the other types of diversity that we should be concerned about in our organizations. Things like education, skills, personality, attractiveness, appearance, marital status, weight, height, family, socioeconomic status, thoughts, and so on. In terms of sex and gender are often used interchangeably, but they're different. Sex distinguishes biological males and females. Gender does include sex, but it also includes common behavioral characteristics, language used to describe gender, clothes, and other things to refer to genders. These are learned through social interactions generalized by sex, often referred to as masculine and feminine. There are also negative terms used to persuade people into conforming to gender stereotypes. We need to be aware of gender stereotypes and not judge others because they don't fit into our view of how males and females should look and act. Sexual orientation is intended to emphasize the diversity of sexuality and gender identity based cultures. LGBT refers to those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. There are other diversities including Q, those who identify as queer or are questioning their sexual identity, known as LGBTQ. I includes intersex people, LGBTI, and A, asexual, LGBTA. Putting them all together would be LGBTQIA, so LGBT plus is becoming more common. We need to include LGBT plus in our groups by avoiding homophobia, an aversion to homosexuals, and bias and discrimination based on a person's sexual orientation if we want to get along with people. The gender and sexual orientation neutral terms replacing husband or wife and boyfriend or girlfriend are significant other and partner. In some school systems, they no longer refer to children as boys and girls. According to the EEOC, harassment and sexual harassment have sex discrimination that includes unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. This conduct constitutes sexual harassment when it explicitly or implicitly affects an individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with the individual's work performance, or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. To keep it simple, for our purposes, sexual harassment is any unwanted behavior of a sexual nature. Quid pro quo sexual harassment occurs when sexual consent affects job outcomes such as getting a job or assignment or promotion or keeping one's job. Hostile work environment sexual harassment occurs when unwelcome sexual behavior creates an intimidating and offensive workplace for anyone. By far the most common offense is men sexually harassing women, but women also are the harasser and same-sex harassment also takes place. Romance does change behavior and human relations at work. Sexuality at work detracts from productivity. Employee dating is rarely a private matter, especially between a supervisor and subordinate. Romance can disrupt other employees, triggering questions about fairness and favoritism, and can disrupt team cohesiveness. Romance by both genders sometimes leads to sexual harassment once the relationship ends. Political correctness is being careful not to offend or slight anyone with our behavior. Affirmative action is a concept was created in the 1960s through a series of policies at the presidential and legislative level in the United States. Except in a few circumstances, affirmative action does not have the effect of law. For the purposes here, affirmative action or AA programs are planned special efforts to recruit, hire, and promote women and members of minority groups. Over the years, support for affirmative action declined as firms valued diversity. Valuing diversity is broader in scope than affirmative action, and it doesn't focus simply on not discriminating against diverse groups and helping only some of them, sometimes at the expense of others through reverse discrimination. But valuing diversity still has a focus on accepting differences and on helping certain groups as means of improving organizational performance. Most organizations have now moved to valuing diversity and inclusion, valuing all types of diversity, which includes integrating everyone to work together while maintaining their differences. Inclusion is a practice of ensuring that all employees feel they belong as valued members of the organization. This is a feeling of being respected, being valued for who you are, feeling a level of supportive energy and commitment from others so that anyone can do their best work. Many organizations are now using both terms or replacing the word diversity with the term inclusion to better reflect this shift. Here, we discuss reasons for sexism and racism and how to overcome them so everyone has equal opportunity in inclusive organizations. Culture promotes differences in males and females, and they'll always be different, but their roles can and should be equal and promote positive self-concepts. Sexist words such as mailman and salesman should be replaced with non-sexist terms such as letter carrier and salesperson. In written communication, the use of he or she is appropriate, but don't overuse it. Organizations should use neutral language as much as possible in their communication. If anyone uses language that offends you or others, assertively state your feelings about the words used. Many times, people don't use sexist and racist language intentionally and will not use it if they're requested to. If it continues, however, report the harassment as harassment in the form of EEOC discrimination. Back in the 70s and 80s, Hofstede surveyed more than 116,000 IBM employees in 40 countries about their work related values. He identified 5 cultural dimensions on a continuum in which employees differ. Power distance, being distributed between levels of management down to employees, can be more accepted or rejected as employees want to participate in decisions that affect them. Individualist cultures believe that individuals should be self sufficient with loyalty to themselves first and the group or company second, whereas collectivism ensures that groups place the company first. Assertive cultures are more aggressive and competitive with a focus on achievement and material possessions, whereas nurturing cultures emphasize the importance of relationship, modesty, caring, and quality of life. Uncertainty avoidance cultures like structure and security and are less likely to take risks, whereas uncertainty acceptance cultures are more comfortable with dealing with change and taking more risk. Long term cultures look to the future and value thrift, whereas short term cultures focus on the past and present and immediate gratification. As Hofstede researchers became dated, Globe confirmed his dimensions and are still valid today. His 5 dimensions were extended and expanded into 9, including hundreds of companies and more countries. As Hofstede's research became dated, Globe confirmed his dimensions and are still valid today. His 5 dimensions were extended and expanded into 9, including hundreds of companies and more countries. Project Globe stands for Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness, which is an ongoing, cross cultural investigation of leadership and national culture. The Globe research team uses data from hundreds of organizations in more than 62 countries to identify 9 dimensions in which national cultures are diverse. As you consider cultural diversities, realize that you're being presented with stereotyped generalizations. Observations from one country or culture are not necessarily applicable to others. The Japanese and Chinese place a high priority on human relations and teamwork. If you try to be an individual star, you won't be successful in Japan or China. However, the French do not place high importance on team effort. Americans prefer to speak face to face from a greater distance than people from most other countries. If you back away or turn to the side from others, they may follow you and create a dance, and you may be considered cold and standoffish. Americans typically view time as a valuable resource that is not to be wasted, and socializing is often considered a waste of time. However, it would be considered impolite to start a business meeting with Hispanics without engaging in a certain amount of relaxed small talk. The Chinese are more long term oriented than Americans, and it takes many meetings to get to the point where they can trust you to do business. There are also a difference in respecting deadlines and being on time. American and Swiss business people usually expect you to be precisely on time for an appointment. However, in several countries, you'll find yourself going to an appointment on time only to be kept waiting. In some countries, if you call a meeting, most members will be late. The work ethic, viewing work as a central life interest and a desirable goal in life, varies around the world. Generally, the Japanese have stronger work ethic than American and Europeans. With a strong work ethic, the acceptance of automation, many Japanese plants are the most productive in the world. Although, there's not much difference between work ethics between Americans and Europeans. Americans work more hours than Europeans, as an example. Americans in general are no longer the world's highest paid employees. The Japanese and Europeans have caught up to earn as much as Americans. However, employees in third world countries continue to be paid much less than employees in developed countries. The legal and political environment becomes increasingly complex as multinationals do business all over the world. Employee health and safety laws are generally more protective in developed countries than in third world countries. Labor laws also vary widely from country to country. When conducting global business, you need to rethink business ethics. In the United States and some other countries, it's illegal to take and give bribes for doing business. However, in some countries, bribing is a standard practice of doing business. In third world nations, employees need basic skills training and may not be capable of participating in management decisions. Some cultures, like those of Japan and the United States, value participation in management, whereas others do not. In some cultures, employees simply want to be told what to do and are not connected with enriched jobs. Management labor relations vary globally. In France, relations are more polarized than in the United States, whereas in Japan, they're more cooperative. You should realize that management and human relations become more complex as styles change from country to country. We need to become more culturally competent. Although effective management of diversity remains an elusive goal, it's difficult to get a diversity of employees to get along at work. Here, we'll discuss how organizations and you can improve your global diversity competency. Inclusion must be part of managers' jobs, starting with the CEO and down through the organization. Companies need active policies and practices to promote diversity. The policies and practices should promote a diversity climate of inclusion that is part of the organizational culture. Records of diverse group hiring and promoting should be kept, and efforts should be made to help these groups succeed in the workplace, often called a diversity audit. In promoting diversity, organizations need to follow all EEO laws and have high standards and hire and advance the most qualified candidates. But given equal qualifications for the job, the diverse candidate, who in some cases will be a white male, such as in nursing, can be given the job to support diversity. Make sure diverse employees have access to the same job training and other practices at work to have equal opportunities to advance. Also, have diversity training for all employees. Diversity training teaches people how to get along with others in the workforce. It values and promotes inclusion. It helps diverse people talk about bias and better understand each other by becoming aware and more empathetic towards people different from themselves. Training breaks down negative stereotypes and builds acceptance of differences, viewing people as individuals and realizing that diversity improves teamwork and organizational performance. No one gets to the top alone. Mentors are higher level managers who prepare high potential people for advancement. Having mentors who are willing to work with you and develop your knowledge, abilities, and skills can help you both in your personal and professional life. Mentoring can be between different people at different companies or in the same organization, either formal or informal. Network diversity groups are made up of diverse groups of employees throughout an organization. Their members share information about how to succeed in the company and how to help the company succeed. You can use the complaint model to help resolve employee complaints in either a union or non-union organization. The complaint model involves these steps. First, listen to the complaint and paraphrase it. Second, have the complainer recommend a solution. Third, schedule time to get all of the facts and make a decision. Fourth, develop and implement a plan and follow up. First, we listen to the complaint and paraphrase it. You need to understand what the other person needs, so when you handle a complex complaint, don't just quickly dismiss it. You need to be responsive. First, if you're talking, they're hearing you, and it's not about you. Listen to the full story without interruptions and paraphrase it to ensure accuracy. When someone comes to you with a complaint, try to take it personally. Even the best supervisors deal with complaints. Never talk down to the complainer, minimize the complaint, or try to talk the person out of the complaint. Step 2. Have the complainer recommend a solution. Ask the individual formally filing a complaint or complaining about a situation to recommend a solution that will resolve the complaint. Requesting a solution does not mean you have to implement it. In some cases, the recommended solution may not be fair or it might not solve the problem. In such cases, you should let the person know that the solution is not possible and explain why. Step 3. Schedule time to get all of the facts and make a decision. Since complaints often involve other people, you might find it necessary to check records or to talk with others. It's often helpful to talk to your boss or your peers who may have handled a similar complaint. They may be able to offer you some advice on how to best resolve it. Even when you have all the facts, it's usually advisable to take some time to weigh the facts before making a decision. Step 4. Finally, develop and implement a plan and follow up. After getting all the necessary facts and advice from others, you should develop a plan. The plan may be developed by simply using the complainer's recommended solution. Work with the employee to find an alternative or present their own plan. You need to address the current complaint, but usually you also need to take action so that it doesn't happen again.